Well, welcome everybody to my podcast, Thriving in the Eye of the Hurricane. So happy that all of you are here, and I'm so happy to have my guests today, Chana and John, who I'll introduce in just a moment. This is our third podcast in our series that will continue indefinitely until I say we're not going to do it anymore, every 3 weeks. And my intention in doing this is really just to help introduce people to the people that helped me write this book, Thriving in the Eye of the Hurricane. My work for the last 40 years with the Three Principles Psychology has been very inspiring to meet so many people from around the world and all kinds of professions whose lives have been transformed and changed by understanding the principles that we talk about on this podcast. So what I wanted to do in this podcast is partly educate, but really just share with you some inspiring stories from people whose lives have changed, whether, with Beverly, the first one, it was talking about how the understanding of the principles help people in prisons, inmates transform, as well as in high-risk communities in Oakland, California, and in other communities around the United States. And our last conversation we had was about healthcare and how the principles have helped transform healthcare institutions like the Mayo Clinic that I worked with for 7 years, and the University of Minnesota, and many other institutions around the world that are now using the principles to help bring out the resilience in their physicians, their nurses, their administrative staff. Because when people are in a resilient state of mind, they think more clearly, they have more compassion, they listen better, they're more understanding. So throughout this series, we'll be talking about how this understanding about the three principles and about the nature of resilience and the nature of transformation affects all of our lives. And so I'll be introducing my guests in a moment. I want to first share my own story. The topic for today is how the mind-body connection, how the principles, the three principles, help us understand that connection between how we are using the power of our mind moment to moment when we're experiencing our physical body, how we experience illness, how we experience symptoms, and how an understanding of the principles has helped each of us. So John will be telling his story and Hannah will be telling hers, but first I'm going to share just a little bit about mine, because I've been studying the principles, teaching the principles, writing books about the principles for over 30 years. When I was 69, just about 4 years ago. My birthday is in 2 days, by the way, so happy birthday, Joe. When I was 69, in the summer of 69, right about this time, I started experiencing a lot of fatigue and a feeling of a mental fog. Couldn't think. I was trying to write a book about healthcare at that time, and I just couldn't write. I thought, am I getting senile? I just turned 69. I was starting to think, oh, I'm getting old. And then my joints started aching, and before long, my back was in excruciating pain, and I just had no energy. And it frightened me. I didn't know what was going on, and I started doing a lot of thinking about it. And as the pain and the symptoms grew worse, one night I was at my cabin in the Canadian wilderness alone. My family had left and I was there alone, and the pain really hit me in the middle of the night. And I was just, I knew I don't know if I had cancer or what was going on. My mind was whirling with what's going on because the pain was so overwhelming. And so I returned home and went to my doctor immediately and was tested for many things. He suspected Lyme disease. And sure enough, I had the worst case he had ever seen. So he sent me to a Lyme specialist, and I started working with her. She was a functional medicine doctor. It helped me greatly, but I had become preoccupied with my symptoms. I developed a huge blind spot about this, and I began to identify who I was with my illness. And so even though I got better, even though a lot of my symptoms subsided, I still wasn't myself. I still felt like something's going on here. And I didn't know that I was innocently interfering with my own healing. And so my wife and I, she was very into Kung Fu and Qigong, and so she was going to go to a course in Malaysia. And so I went along with and was going to attend the Qigong Healing course. And we took our time getting there, went to Thailand, had a wonderful vacation. It was very rested. I thought I was doing a lot better when I got there. But our friends who lived in Penang, where the conference was, when they saw me, they were shocked because they said, "You always look so young. You've aged so much. We were really worried about you." They didn't verbalize this. They told me this later. So during that conference, there was a guy in the conference who was a Qigong healer from Switzerland. And I thought, maybe I could see him, maybe he could help. And so I caught up with him when we were going to have lunch one day. His name was Andrew. And I said, "Andrew, can I get a session with you?" And he said, "Well, sure, yeah, let's just do it now." And I said, walking in the streets of Penang, there's horns honking and motorcycles weaving in and out. And he says, "Yeah, why not?" And I said, "Okay." And so he says, "So what's the problem, Joe?" And I said, "Well, last summer I got Lyme disease." And he said, "Stop right there. Don't ever say you have Lyme disease." And I said, "Well, why not? I didn't even know I had it after I was diagnosed." And he said, "Every time you say that, your body is a quantum field of energy. Every time you say that, the power of your mind, the power of thought tells each of your cells, whatever you believe about that, whatever you've read about that, all the concepts and ideas that you have, those signals get sent to each cell, and you're keeping yourself from getting well." I said, "Oh yeah, I know all about that. I've written some books about that on the three principles." And he says, and I went on, "Oh yeah, I really understand." And he looked at me, he says, "No, you don't. You don't believe me." And I said, I was a little insulted. And I said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "How do you know I don't believe you?" And he says, "I can see it in your face." And I said, "Really?" So I thought, what's up here? And he keeps talking to me some more about the mind-body connection. And I'm relating it all to the three principles, my concept. And I wasn't really seeing what he was saying. But so he said again, do you believe me now?" And I said, yeah, that really makes sense. And he says, "No, you don't. You don't believe me. You think you believe me. You think you know, but you really don't see it insightfully." And then then it was like it stunned me. It was like it was one of those moments where I just kind of got humbled by what he was saying. And all at once I saw this public relations department in my mind. All the conversations I had with the colleagues I had at the Mayo Clinic, my doctor friends, everybody I knew who had Lyme before, reading everything on the internet. Every time I'd run into someone, they'd say, "How you doing with the Lyme?" It was like a constant feedback loop that had become my whole world without me knowing it. And I'd run into a huge blind spot. And at that moment, I saw it. And when I saw it, what I was doing with my thinking in the moment, it was like it just collapsed. The whole thought system collapsed. And he looked at me and he said, "Now you believe me." And I said, "How do you know?" He says, "I can see it in your face. You believe me. Now you know." And I said, "Well, that's great. Can we set up a session?" He said, "We just had it. You're done." I said, "What? Well, can I pay you?" And he says, "No, forget about it." So I thought, and I just felt like I had felt that the day I met Sid Banks, my whole mind was just swirling. I was so stunned and I was so relieved and I was so confused, and all this mishmash of emotion and thinking was going on. And I just felt kind of shaken. And so that night I went to bed and I slept really deep. And I woke up at 7 o'clock the next morning, more awake than I had felt maybe in years. I had so much energy. So I went down to the gym. We were staying in a hotel condo thing. And I started doing laps. And I just felt like I could do them forever. And then I went to the weight room and I doubled my weights from the day before. No problem. I thought, God, this is like a miracle. What happened? So I go up to see my friends and I walk in the apartment, and my friend sees me and she says, my God, what happened to you? You look 10 years younger than you did yesterday. And I said, I do? She said, yes. We were really worried about you, Joe. So that was super powerful. And I was humbled because I thought I understood mind, thought, and consciousness really deeply. But innocently, all of us create blind spots, things that we don't intend to do, but we just don't see out of fear, something we've never dealt with before. But that for me has transformed not only my life, but really embarked on me doing a lot of work helping other people with chronic diseases. And so has John, and so has Hannah done the same thing. And so I would love for them to share their story of healing and also how they've taken this to other people. So I think who wants to go first? Hannah, you're on the top. Do you want to go first?
Okay, thank you. So my name's Chana Studley, and happy birthday, Joe. It's thank you for having us on your podcast. This is really exciting. Yeah, so just real quickly, my story is one of I had a lot of injuries. I'd been mugged 3 times. I grew up in England, and the first time I was mugged, my skull was fractured. I mean, I can put my finger on it right here. Like, I know you can't see it, but I can feel where the bone knitted back together. And that happened when I was a student. It was just kind of one of those things that happen when you're a student, you know. And and then about 3 years later, I was mugged by 3 guys who slammed me on the ground and beat the living daylights out of me. I thought I was going to die. My back was severely injured in that one. I had 3 herniated discs. And then I moved down to London, where I was working in the theater, and I was riding my bike home late one night, and some 60-year-old kid decided to get off his bike and throw it at my head. So the impact of the bike at me was kind of like that, you know, because I was riding this way and he threw the bike at me that way. And he actually broke my neck. C1 and C2 or 3 were cracked through. I didn't know that for 2 years. I was actually walking around with a broken neck for 2 years. I mean, thank God the spinal cord was only bruised. I think it wasn't obviously seriously damaged, because I've always been able to walk. But going forward from that, I was always told that all the physical pain I had was because of my injuries. Now, I'm not a doctor, so I believe what I was told. I was told that I had to cope with the pain, that I had to manage it. And so that was my life for about 25 years. I went to a chiropractic appointment every month for 25 years. And I would go to more appointments when I'd have a flare-up. And about every 6 weeks, 3 months, I would have this flare up where the muscles in the middle of my back would start to squeeze up like this, and it would send my whole back distorted out of shape. I used to describe myself as being like Audrey Hepburn on one side and Marilyn Monroe on the other side. I was that distorted. And then when it got really bad, I'd be bent forward like a 90-year-old lady. I had a walking stick. I was like in my 20s, you know, and I had a walking stick. And I was actually paralyzed a few times. I was living in California by this time, because I was working in Hollywood on big movies, and several times I was taken from work to the emergency room. And I remember the doctor one time asking me what was my pain level, you know, between 1 and 10. I'm like, it's about 15, like this. And that just became my life, you know. They would say to me, "Oh, your arm's numb because that's where the nerve for your, for your arm comes out of your neck, where it was broken." So I never was really looking for a way to get rid of my pain, because I didn't think it could go away because I had these injuries. And then I came across the 3 principles about 6, 7 years ago, and I did a course in London, and I live in Jerusalem. So flying backwards and forwards from here to London was quite expensive, plus the money of the course. I needed to save some money, and I was feeling kind of okay. So I thought I'd cut out the chiropractor appointments. And I thought, you know, if I get into trouble, I can always call her. And it was nothing at her. She was amazing. And after I finished the course, I suddenly noticed that all my pain had gone. not only had the pain gone, but I felt strong. Like I'd spent the last 20 years feeling fragile, because when the doctor told me that my neck had been broken and that I'd need treatment for the rest of my life, it kind of put an idea in my head that I'm fragile, I'm broken, and that I'm going to constantly be in this state of almost being paralyzed. In fact, I remember going to the chiropractor one time in like absolute agony, and she said to me, you know, what did you do this time? And I said, well, you know, I turned to put my seatbelt on. She goes, yeah, well, that will do it, you know. And I'm like, when I think about that now, it makes no sense, right? So here I was, I kind of done this course at like learning how to be a 3 principles practitioner, and I felt strong. And I felt, you know, like I felt better than I had done in my whole life. I'd had IBS, I'd had allergies, I'd had skin problems, and they too had gone away. So I wondered if I could recreate this in other people. So I did start doing some research. I did some case studies and working with some people locally, and they started to get better too. So I got really excited, and I started doing reading all kinds of research, anything I could get my hands on, and got very excited about it. And one of the hardest things I think I've had in my work with other people is that because my pain went away almost as a side effect of understanding the 3 principles, and I wasn't using it to get rid of my pain. People often say to me, so how long did it take? And what did you do? And I'm like, I didn't do anything. I just started understanding how my mind works. And that's kind of, the pain went away as I think as a side effect of my nervous system calming down, because I'd spent so long in this kind of hypervigilant state, which I then think went inward when I started doing lots of kind of self-help work. I got hypervigilant about my thinking, which was also still sending messages to my brain that I was in danger. You know, anything that was wrong, you know, something wrong, then that's, you know, you don't feel safe. And because I started seeing that I was safe, that I am strong, that I, you know, that like you were saying about resilience, that that's innately in me, I think those messages to my brain just kind of like calmed down and went away. And now I think one of the most amazing benefits, like there's so many benefits to this understanding, but one of them is for me is knowing I don't have to have anything on that pain. Like I can get a twinge every now and again, like anybody, but I don't have anything on it, so it doesn't turn into anything like it used to. So now I've been working with, you know, people around the world, and, you know, and seeing amazing, you know, recoveries in other people. It's very inspiring, and I feel very privileged to be able to do that, you know. And like I mentioned, I live here in Jerusalem, and we've just been through quite a difficult time. We've just had another war. I've been living here 10 years, and this is the 3rd one I've been through. My bedroom is actually a bomb shelter. And, you know, I always have some bottles of water and in there just in case. And when it gets really bad, they tell us to have cans of tuna and chocolate. I have a gas mask, although it's probably out of date now. And so, you know, this is just how we live here. And so when we had this most recent, I was going to say flare up, but that's pain. I guess it's a flare up in you know, relations with our neighbors. And I actually had a new experience this time. Like I'd been through, like I said, a few of these experiences now where, you know, for a couple of weeks, we get a lot of news and a lot of messages. We have a system in Israel where there's sirens all around the country. And we have what we call the Happy Siren, and there's the Scary Siren. The Happy Siren announces things like holidays and our Shabbat that we have, you know, once a week. It's like our Sabbath. And that's just a really, you know, beautiful sound, and it's just an announcement that we're having a holiday and everybody's, you know, celebrating and being with their families. But we also have the Scary Siren, and the Scary Siren goes, it's kind of like a wailing animal. It's like woo, woo, up and down, and it's really loud and quite alarming when you first hear it. And so in this last war, it went off, and just one time whilst here in Jerusalem, because we're pretty safe. I mean, safety is a state of mind, but I live just a few blocks from the Knesset, which is like saying I live a few blocks from the White House or 10 Downing Street, you know, so I'm right in the center of town near all the government buildings. And so, you know, I just calmly went into my bedroom, like shut the big security door. I had my cell phone with me, which I hadn't had in previous incursions, and just waited for the siren to stop and then get it all clear. And then about 3 or 4 days later, you know, the sirens were going off in the rest of the country. Other parts of the country were, having a lot of rocket attacks. And thank God we have this thing called the Iron Dome, which is amazing. It just protects us from the rockets landing. And but some do get through, and there was started to be some injuries, and some bad things were happening. And I started watching the news, which I don't watch any news pretty much most of the time. But when something like this is happening, I started watching the news, and it was I think it was Friday. And I've been, I don't usually work on Fridays because that's our weekend. And so I was maybe watching a bit too much news in the morning, just trying to find out what was happening. And by the afternoon, I started feeling kind of anxious. And I haven't felt anxious in quite a few years now. It's just I felt like buzzy, it was hard to describe. Felt like my blood supply was kind of fizzy. I don't know how else to say it. I just kind of felt a bit agitated. And I thought, I'm a bit anxious. And so, because things were kind of escalating, and there were ground troops were going to be sent in, and it was, getting a bit heated. So I thought, see, in the past, if I was going through something difficult, I wouldn't mind telling you afterwards. My pride would always conspire with, my with my ego, and I had no problem telling you about things after the event. But letting anybody know during the event is always been tough for me. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to have a new experience with this. I'm going to let somebody know that I'm not, I'm feeling a little bit anxious. And so I started going through my phone, and I was thinking, who can I talk to? And I thought, I don't want to talk to anybody locally because they got their own stuff going on. Talking to anybody else around the world just isn't going to understand this, And I was flipping through my contacts on WhatsApp, and I was trying to and I started saying I was overthinking it now, right? And then I was flipping through, and I came across my lovely friend David Hill. If you guys don't know, he's a three principles practitioner. He's a veteran from the British Army, and he works with veterans. And I thought, Dave will know it. Dave will understand, right? So I just sent Dave a quick message. I said, Dave, there's sirens going off. There's helicopters landing, just a few blocks from me. Helicopters are going off and up and down all day long. Just the sound of helicopters is kind of a bit anxious making. I said, Dave, I'm feeling a little bit anxious. I'm so glad you're there. And he messaged me back, and he said, I'm in a business meeting. Otherwise, I'd call you back, but you don't have to explain anything to me. He said, I get it. I get explosions. I get sirens. You don't have to explain it. He said, I'm there for you. And you can call me later if you need to. And just doing that, it just left, and then, and we had Friday night was great. And I woke up on Saturday morning, and I don't put my computer or my telephone, my phone on Saturdays. And it's like my peaceful day. And so it was just so nice not to stuff was still going on, but my level of consciousness had changed. I wasn't in the thinking anymore, so therefore I wasn't feeling it anymore. And it was just such a privilege to be able to not have anything on it, like I've learned to do with the pain, and like I've learned to share with my clients. And safety really is a state of mind. I know people. I had a friend actually in New York who called me at one point, and she said, I've been crying for days. I'm so scared for you. And I'm like, you live in Brooklyn. Get over it. It's like, I'm here where the sirens are going off, and we're just dealing with it. We're getting on with it. So, it really is about separate realities, because you can be right in the middle of, danger. This was getting a bit scary, a bit close. And, depending on my level of consciousness and my mood, how I see it, is going to affect how I experience it. And that's a lot of what I share with my clients, sharing. And even in the last couple of days, I'll just finish with this, even how I see my trauma now is even changing, because it even sounds wrong to call it trauma. I mean, at the time, yes, I thought I was going to die. When those guys were beating me, it was awful. And for many years afterwards, I had, what they call PTSD, or the classic symptoms of that. But now, because when I think about it and I talk about it, because I'm in a better mood, a better state of consciousness, I feel those memories with courage and compassion and wisdom. That I'm not experiencing it the way I always used to. And so it doesn't even feel like talking about trauma anymore doesn't even make sense to me. It's because I'm well, physically, emotionally. I feel like there's so many blessings of this understanding that that resilience, like that you were talking about, Joe, is just, it's just part of, it's who we are. It's just part of everyday life now. So I really appreciate you inviting me on here to talk about this. And I'm going to hand it over to John now, but if people have questions, you know, we'd love to answer them too.
Thank you. That was really powerful. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Well, hi everybody, I'm John, and thank you, Hannah and Joe. I hadn't really kind of known either of your stories that well, and I was kind of moved by listening to both of you and resonate with both of you in many ways as well. The thing that just occurs to me, just listening to you guys, is that thought is heavy, and I didn't know this. And it's probably worth giving you a bit of background to my kind of health story. So, you know, before I got sick all those years ago, I was very much a kind of type A striver, achiever kind of guy. And, you know, if you were to characterize what it probably looked like in my head, if you tried to picture it, you can imagine this big control panel with lots of levers and things like that. And it really felt like it was my job to manipulate those levers and to try and, you know, get my life right. So it's like the relationship lever, the finance lever, you know, the what am I doing with my life lever, the relationship lever, like there was levers for everything. And I was busy in my mind doing what I thought everybody did, which was going around trying to configure those things exactly right so that I could have the perfect life. And as you can imagine, that was pretty hard going. And I just thought that was the way it worked. And I had evidence in my life that seemed to support that being how life worked as well. So I apparently had done quite well. I was good at my job as an IT consultant. I'd done well academically. You know, I used to train like a crazy man in the gym. And it all looked like it was a product of my very good configuring of the levers in my mind. And somehow I was able to conveniently forget those occasions when things didn't quite work out the way I thought they were going to, because I was always focused on, yeah, I'm good at this lever configuring thing. So that's how it looked to me. And then in 2007, I got sick, and there was quite a lot of stuff going on in my life. We were looking after someone who had cancer. I just got married. We were pregnant with our first child. And then I got hit by this virus, and it really, really floored me. And I had all kinds of treatments. I had, you know, medication. I had all sorts of stuff happened, and I seemed to just keep going downhill. And it actually culminated in me at one point collapsing through a glass shower door one night when I was in the bathroom. And then, of course, I was rushed to the hospital, and they threw scans at me and all sorts of stuff. And they couldn't really find anything that was wrong with me. They just said, you know, you're pretty anxious, and, you know, that seems to be what's going on with you. And I didn't get what they meant. I was just thinking, well, of course I'm anxious. I've just collapsed through a glass shower door. But I think what they were pointing to was the degree of anxiety that was in my mind over my life in general, which to them was just looking like anxiety, but to me was looking like me being a good lever configurer. You know, I just thought that was me on my game, you know, so like, you don't know what's wrong with me? Don't worry, I'll use the levers up here and I'll figure out what's wrong with me. And that didn't work out too well. So here I am, you know, getting increasingly unwell, and then feeling the pressure of a baby on the way, and being, you know, newly married, and feeling like I have to configure how I'm going to work supporting my family and all of these sorts of things. And then I'm in this increasingly debilitated state to which doctors are not able to give me many answers. So I really rev up this thing in my mind. I really go into, don't worry, I'll figure this out. And I watched as I literally went down, 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 further downhill. And it culminated in pretty much my whole life kind of falling apart. My wife and I were separated for a bit. I didn't see my son born because I was too sick. I was hospitalized for 3 months. And it was a really dark period. And I started to make some form of recovery with the treatments that I was given. And by the time I came out of hospital, it was sort of early 2008. I would say I was sort of semi-functional, but I was very far from this kind of type A high-performing guy that I'd always seen myself to be. And I was very upset about that and really struggling in my mind to try and work out how to get back to that. And I remember I was with my friend who was a yoga therapist at the time, and we were just chatting over life. And there was this moment where I got incredibly quiet sitting with him. And I can't tell you what we were talking about. And I know I didn't sit in that quiet for long, maybe 5-10 seconds, if that. And I thought, this is nice. And then I quickly resumed the troubleshooting in my head. Yeah, this quiet space, that's lovely, isn't it? But what about my marriage? What about my health? What about my symptoms? What about my work and the fact that I'm being supported by family and all these things that my mind was objecting to? So it was like I touched this quiet, but I didn't respect it. I didn't see that there was a value to it. It was like, yeah, well, quiet's nice, but how do you navigate your life? And so I then spent the next 7 years on this journey of, like many people do, trying everything under the sun, trying to figure out everything, sort of knowing there was this quiet there, but not really seeing the value of being there in any way, shape or form, and really still holding on to this part of my mind that thought it could figure everything out. So 7 years this kind of went on. And during that 7 years, I got involved with the principles. I started to learn more about it. I'd formerly been mentored by Michael Neal, and I kind of re-engaged with him at the point he moved his practice over to doing more work with the principles. And I got very curious about what he was doing because it was so different to what he'd done before. And, you know, several things happened, and I ended up sort of working with him and apprenticing with him at the time. And during the time I was apprenticing with him, he'd asked me at the beginning, he said, is there anything that might sabotage your apprenticeship? And I said, yeah, I'm going to have some kind of health flare up that's going to mess everything up. And sure enough, that's what happened. I had this health flare up. And I remember one day going to see him. He was in London at the time. And I had this problem with heat intolerance and sunlight intolerance as part of my symptoms. And it literally resulted in me shadow walking. I had to walk in the shadows of buildings, because if I was in the sun, I'd get this incredible reaction, feel very, very unwell. And I'd had this experience going to have lunch with Michael one day. So I thought, you know what, Michael Neal, he's a coach, maybe he's got some insight into this stuff. So I asked him, I said, have you ever had anybody that had this problem? And he said, no, but maybe you're a vampire. And I said, thanks for that. And I didn't know what to say for it for a while. And he said, well, being more serious, maybe this is the power of thought to create your experience. To which I used an expletive. I know we're not really swearing on here, but I basically told him to off. Because to me, that was like, you're making this up, John. You're making up these symptoms. And I'd had enough people in my life who told me that this was all in my head and that it wasn't a real thing. So I was like, I wasn't very happy that day, but the seed had been sown. And I found myself going to see a functional medicine doctor who had been on my radar for a while. And he threw a battery of tests at me. And the tests all came back normal, bar a couple of them. And I remember him saying, yeah, your nutritional status is all green, which didn't surprise me because I had a spreadsheet of supplements that I needed to take and alarms set on my phone to make sure I was taking them. So I was like, yeah, I'm not surprised. I've configured the levers of my supplements really well. No wonder I've got green for all of that. But there was another one that came back and it showed that my cortisol was really high and my other hormones were on the floor. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, well, cortisol's high when you're in fight or flight. And I was like, well, why would I be in fight or flight? I'm not doing much. I'm not having a fight with anybody. I actually wasn't doing very much with my life other than trying to get better. And then I remembered what Michael had said to me. He said, maybe this is the power of thought to create your experience. And I realized that for the longest time in my life, I had lived in the control panel of my head every waking moment of my life, trying to get somewhere, trying to control and configure and work out my life. And I thought that all took place in thought. And what I came alive to in talking with this functional medicine practitioner and putting it together with my understanding of the principles was that, oh no, this is just an innocent misunderstanding that I've had, that thought somehow runs the show. Actually, there's a deeper intelligence, what we call in the principles mind. And this is the thing that is always operating inside of us all of the time. It's just that John really thinks he's really good in his thinking at running this stuff, but actually the results of these tests show that John really sucks at doing all of this. And this is why I'm sick. And to take your share, Joe, that was the moment a house of cards collapsed in my head. It was the moment I recognized that I had been taking on the weight of thought in my head, thinking it was valuable as a tool to run life, run my illness, and get somewhere. And what I saw was, no, that place I dropped into all those years ago with my yoga teacher, well, that was what I was looking for all along. And it had nothing to do with my life. It was inside of me all along. And the only thing that was ever taking me away from that was my innocent misunderstanding that somehow thought was the thing that navigated my life, when actually it did anything but. So that day, it fell apart. And I literally felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. Now, I'm not going to tell you, my journey was not quite like yours, Joe. I didn't suddenly get rid of all my symptoms. What I did get rid of was the idea that they were being caused by anything other than my overvigilance. And I did get rid of the idea that they were somehow something to be feared and controlled. So I started living my life just with the symptoms, not being afraid of them anymore. And because I wasn't afraid of them, and because I wasn't overvigilant about them anymore, the body then went into a state of rest and digest, probably for the first time in many years, and started to do its thing. And I found that, you know, to take the heat intolerance thing, within 6 weeks of sort of having this insight, I was now on holiday in Turkey. There used to be this very unflattering photo of me on my old website of me standing with my shirt off in the sunlight in 40 degrees C heat in Turkey, and with a bit of a belly as well at the time. But it was such a big deal, because in 6 weeks I'd gone from shadow walking to being outside in the sunlight and the heat without any symptoms. It had literally collapsed. This whole symptomology and pathology collapsed as I'd reconnected to that space of quiet, and I'd respected it as the source of what runs us and what runs life. Now, I thought, to how I've ended up helping other people, I thought, well, you got better quick. You can't have had chronic fatigue. Nobody gets better from chronic fatigue that quick. They must have misdiagnosed you. It's really nice that you're well. Let's park the fact that you've got better. Don't do any work with it ever again. And let's get on with doing all the other stuff that you like doing. I did not want to work with chronic fatigue syndrome. I resisted it big time. But hey, life had a different plan. And the house that I'm living in, we ended up buying it. And the guy who owned it, he told me that his granddaughter was really unwell with chronic fatigue. And she was down to like a 20% attendance rate at school. And I heard the story and my heart broke. And I was like, look, John, just get over yourself. Have a conversation with her. At worst, you're going to have a cup of tea and be nice to her. At best, maybe she'll feel a bit better. That was how I saw it. Well, I met with this girl and I saw the same misunderstandings about performance, about trying to get somewhere, about where peace was, about the value or the lack of value of thought in navigating our lives. And I just shared my experience. I shared my knowing with her. And I watched as she recovered, and she went from being this withdrawn 15-year-old kid who looked just beaten by life to turning up in heels with makeup, telling me about parties she was going to and about the job that she'd taken on. I was like, guess you're doing better then. But I tell you, Joe, that was not enough for my mind. I was like, okay, great, she's better, back to what you did before. And then something else happened. So I ended up doing, another coaching training, and I had to do a community project. And I worked with somebody who had been ill for 23 years, tried everything under the sun. And I saw the same misunderstandings with her. And I did the same. I shared what I saw about the principles, about my own insights, about what I knew. And after a month of working with her, she comes to me and she said, I don't think I've got chronic fatigue anymore. I think I'm better. I think I'm well. And I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But I was holding on to my, I'm not doing this thing. So I had this idea. It was 2016. I was at the 3P conference and I ended up attending a talk on research that was being given by Tom Kelly and some other 3P colleagues. And I went there and I had this harebrained idea. And I was like, you know what, John, there's one way to put this to bed. You can go and do some research and prove that it doesn't work, really. That was how I saw it. So I come out of this research and I meet my friend Karen, who is my colleague. And I said, Karen, want to do some research? She said, yeah, sure, what we're doing. And I told her what it was all about. So we got 23 people together and we worked with Tom Kelly to put together a formal research project. We had people from all kinds of backgrounds, people who'd been ill for a short period of time, longer period of time, one guy who was in a wheelchair at the time we worked with them. And we did it as a proper study. So we had a control group and a test group. And we worked with these people, again, sharing what we saw and what we knew, with the benefit of Karen's understanding of the sort of medical side of things. And we just watched and saw these incredible changes. And I loved what I think Hannah and you said in a way, Joe. It was not so much that we were addressing the illness so much. It was that we were addressing what every human being is looking for, which is peace and well-being, and the role of thought and the role of mind in our lives. And people were getting sight of that more and settling down. And because we were able to help connect the dots from our own personal recoveries of chronic fatigue, help them understand the relationship with that to what was going on in their bodies, we just watched as people started to make these incredible recoveries. By some miracle, I'm not going to say this is because of my controlling in my head. By some miracle, this ended up published in the APA after 3 years.
American Psychological Association.
Yeah, it got published, but that's humorous to me, because I would love to say, yeah, Joe, that was because I was really good at making stuff happen, and it was my type A, in my head lever pulling that made that happen. No, I was dragged along by mind, and eventually had to accept the fact that, okay, there was something to this, and somebody else, when it was peer reviewed, thought there was too. And there is, because we see some miraculous stories. But I got into this not out of choice. I got into this because life knew better than me.
Yeah.
So I think I've gone on, I think that was 15 minutes, was it?
Yeah, you were spot on, John. Thank you. Both of you guys. God, your timing is awesome. Wonderful, wonderful, incredible stories. Just, God, that is so inspiring just to hear that again from you guys. But I think I heard it in a much deeper way this time than I heard it the first time I heard you tell your story.
Oh.
So thank you so much. So let's put it in gallery view and open it up to comments, questions, or if either of you have anything that occurred to you after you finished that you wished you had said, you can also use this time to share that. Does anybody have a question? Maybe you can go down to the
Well, I have one
reaction.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned, Chana, being mugged as though it were a common occurrence. And I've never been mugged in my life. And I wanted to hear what you had to say about that. Is that something that was common where you were then living? Is it something? Tell me your thoughts on that. I was just astounded. It was like you went out to buy apples. I got mugged this time, and then I got mugged that time. Expand on it just a bit for me.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think what you've just witnessed in how I talk about it is one of the that's recovery. That means I'm not suffering with it anymore. In fact, about 3 or 4 years ago, Mara Gleason was here. Mara and Eric, they came here to Jerusalem to do a conference, One Thought, One Solution global conference. And they had me talk on a panel called Reimagining Fear. And so I spoke at the university in front of, several hundred, people from the university, professors, students. And I told my story in quite detail, like much more than I did just now, about like, I thought I was going to die, in that middle one. And the professors and that came up to me afterwards, so they could not believe that actually happened. They said they because their training is like, if you go through that kind of trauma, then you're going to suffer for this amount of time, or if you go through that kind of trauma, you need this kind of treatment, as if there's like a cause and effect, it's like, I don't know how to describe it, but like there's a very set idea they have about trauma and injuries, and they kind of hinted that either it wasn't as bad as it was, because how could I go through something so bad and be okay now, or it was as bad, but I'm not as well now as I think I am. So it was, and I'm like, both are true. So, the first one, when I was in Manchester in college, it was a pretty rough area I lived in. It's called Moss Side. If anybody's, English here, they might know about Moss Side and Hume. In the 1980s, it was pretty rough. But when I reported to the police, they were kind of like, yeah, we know who's doing it. I'm like, what? I wanted to strangle that policeman for a long time afterwards, because they had more important things to deal with, like, gangs and murders and drugs and stuff. And then, so it was, I don't know, I think after the third one, I got really dark and really miserable pretty quickly, because I got into this mindset that the world is a very scary, dangerous place. And that I knew that if a bus was going to go out of control in London that day, I'd be the one who's going to run over. I'd lost it that much. That I had evidence. I had police reports and x-rays to prove the world is a very dangerous place. But that was totally, we're all living in our thinking all the time, but my thinking had gotten so low, so miserable, that I was kind of expecting it, because, like you said, one time is bad enough, but 3 times? So there must be some kind of Murphy's Law, some kind of conspiracy against me. I didn't like to think I was paranoid, but I kind of was. and like, I just, I became terrified to leave my house. And I couldn't for quite a year or so, unless someone was with me to do like just real emergency kind of stuff. And thank God, I remember my recovery from that really shifted when someone said to me that she asked me if I was ready to let go of my story, because it'd become my identity. And I was the girl who was mugged 3 times. And so when she said that to me the first time, it was really threatening. Because I thought, if that's not who I am, then who am I? And I think there was a fear that I was really boring and dull. If I didn't have some story of woe to tell you, then you wouldn't be interested in me. I'd be rejected. I'd be alone. So. But I started, slowly to see, with the guidance of some really wonderful people who really were very kind to me, and started showing me that I wasn't my thinking, that this was just something that happened to me. And so, like I was saying, like now, when I think about it, it's like I don't even think about it with any kind of, anything on it for a couple of decades now. But especially now, I'm even seeing it. Even I don't. I've kind of gone through seeing it neutrally, to the point now, like I was in a podcast once and someone asked me if like I was happy that I was mugged because of like all the growth that can come from it. I'm like, I don't know if I'd say that. I don't recommend it to anybody as a means of growing, but I now see it as it's just part of my history. It's part of my story, and there's plenty of other things that have happened to me that are far more interesting to talk about now. And I think that's a big strong message to give to people, that if something terrible does happen to you, that it doesn't mean you're broken, and it's not even about surviving. It's just that was then and this is now, and it's not who I am. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Paige has her hand up, and I just want to make a one-line comment on what you just said. My wife Michael is a poet, and her first poem she ever wrote on the back of a matchbook was, "There are no mistakes, only the revelation of the inner self." And for me, that's, things happen. to us in life. You get sick, you get mugged, you have a car accident, you get a divorce, your child has a disability. But it's always the possibility of an opportunity for a deeper awakening into the nature of mind and the nature of life. And so it's a win-win. And it's hard for us to see at times, but that's, I think a lot of times people learn the principles and they think, well, how could this happen? I know the principles. And I say, hey, it's time. There's no end to how much consciousness you can regain. There's no end to that. It's infinite. Okay, Paige, you have a question.
Thank you so much. And thank you both for sharing your stories. I have a child who is, through all of your stories, some have this common universal thread like they do. We spent a lot of time looking at Lyme disease, looking at some symptomology my daughter was having, and she, after 2 years, got a diagnosis of this rare bone mineralization disorder, and it requires these daily injections, and it's kind of an involved thing. And along with that has come a lot of thinking on my part, for sure, and hers. And when I try to talk to her about the power of thought, she's like, that's a load of crap. I've got diagnoses. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I take medication. Like, she doesn't want to hear about the thoughts. She wants the label. She's really, she's kind of fallen into this about introducing herself almost as mentally ill and disabled because of all of this. So clearly I have things to do with my thinking, but she wants antidepressants. She wants a lot of other medical intervention that focuses constantly on what's wrong. And I'm just wondering any input or advice. Like I said, I had her talk to someone that I feel is well-versed in the principles, and she just thought that was too abstract and not helpful. And so I'm not really sure, but it doesn't seem helpful to have her talk to a psychologist that sends her videos on personality disorders and depression and anxiety and things. I just wonder what would be helpful to someone who's not open to understanding, but I'm wanting to be supportive.
So Chana, you want to respond to that?
I'm happy to say something about that. Yeah, so first, I'm sorry about your daughter and what you're going through. As a parent, I know it's always hard to watch our children suffer with anything. And I completely understand as a parent why you might want to do everything you can to alleviate your child's suffering, because me too. And you know what? I'm probably the worst coach for my own children because of that on some level. Because, the thing that I see really helps is when we can see the well-being of somebody, irrespective of their journey, irrespective of the direction they're going, and irrespective of the choices that they make as well. And
that's a tough one.
It's a tough one. I totally agree with you. Where my grounding is shakiest, honestly, is when I have to parent my own kids, because I got opinions, I got attachments, I got thinking about what's right for them, about what's wrong for them, about the direction I want them to go, about all sorts of things. I'm noisy. Whereas with my clients, I'm not like that. In fact, that's a lot of where I have to. So when I think about working with somebody, one of the things that I'm really checking into when I first do an exploratory with them is, do I see that this person's okay, despite whatever protest they might have about how broken they are? Because if I see a bit of that, I'm holding a space for them without anything that I say, that comes from a feeling level that points them to the truth of who they are and the well-being that's inside of them, irrespective, right? The communication is energetic. It is less about what I am saying. Now, as a parent with attachments and with things that we want for our kids, that's a lot harder. And I fall over on that all the time, right? So I just want to put that's okay if you're doing that too. But the direction to look for you might be, for example, you said about her wanting to take antidepressants. Well, maybe that's part of her journey. Maybe that's part of what, and I can see from your action, and I I get it, right? Sometimes we have to be able to let people go on their own journey of understanding. And if you've got resistance to that, which I would understand, then maybe look at that and see, what have you got on that? Why might that not be an option for you? Where are you looking for your own well-being in wanting her to take a particular direction? Because if you can see something new about that, you're going to be more of a settled upstream feeling influence on her. You will not convey the principles so much in what you say. You will convey them more in the energy and the feeling that you come from. Does that
Agreed. So helpful. Very much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's just awesome. What a great.
Yes, that's amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't think anything more can be said about that unless you. Then that was really brilliant.
Amazing. Thank you again.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Anybody else have a question? We've got. Let's see. We've got 1 or 2 more minutes. Does anyone have a comment or a question? Going.
Oh, is that James' hand up?
James, where?
Yeah. I just want to say that this has been amazing, and I really appreciate. Looks like we have somebody that got the time wrong showing up. Anyway, yeah, it's just been amazing, and what I really appreciate, and I was going to ask, but both of you guys just went ahead and did it in the responses, is that so often I hear about, the amazing principles, and I've used them myself. Joe introduced them to me, but I struggle with my thinking. In fact, I don't consider thinking and thought to be synonymous. My thinking is the stuff, the lever pulling and all that stuff. And thought to me is what arises from mind. Mm-hmm. But, I get caught up with my thinking about that, and it doesn't go anywhere. And both of you guys, how does somebody put it? Instead of being just descriptive, you were prescriptive. Like, you guys both gave me something I could work with. And I really appreciate that. You guys just put it in plain English. Hold the space for this. See past their misunderstanding because it's your truth. And it just got me grounded. I'm really, really grateful for it. Both you guys. I plan to listen to this more than once. So thank you.
Thank you. And I love how you can share stuff and you just not know what people are going to get when you share it.
and you don't even know what you're going to share.
No.
It just comes out in the moment. Well, you guys were just wonderful guests. Thank you so much for what you shared today. It was really powerful for me, and I'm sure it's powerful not only for those of you who are hearing it right now, but those of you who will hear it later. Like my friend Keith, maybe the time zone was a little different, but you can always listen to this. It'll be recorded. Hey, Keith. Dr. Keith Blevins down there. Yeah. So thank you, everybody, so much. And pass this on to anybody that you know, that we're having this every 3 weeks. And you're all on my mailing list, I assume, so you'll find out who the next speakers will be. And if you're interested in getting my book, it is available for pre-order on any site. It's not out until October, but you can pre-order it. So thank you so much for listening. Thanks for being here alive and well, or on a recording later.